For Your Eyes Only, FERPA, presented by Donnell Clay and the Sedgwick County Special Education Cooperative. Objectives of this presentation are to discuss what is FERPA, what are the consequences for violating FERPA, how does FERPA affect me, and what are some of the common violations of FERPA. FERPA is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act of 1974. It is a federal law that protects the privacy of all students regardless of their age. FERPA gives students the following rights: the right to access the educational records kept by the school, the right to demand that their records be disclosed only with consent, the right to amend their records, the right to file complaints against the school for disclosing records in violation of FERPA. What are records as defined by FERPA? Records are defined as records that directly relate to the student and that contain personally identifiable information. For example, written documents, computer media, video, audio tapes, or CDs, photographs. In brief, records are anything that contain identifiable information to that student. What are excluded by FERPA? Things that are excluded are information that are relevant to the student if there is an educational need to know. Also, if a student is transferring to another school, that information can be transferred. Some people that can look at records are supervisors for evaluation purposes. Also, if you have a judicial order, or if there's a subpoena, or for health and safety. What are not records covered by FERPA? Private notes of individual teachers. If they are written for that teacher only, they are not considered under FERPA. However, they cannot be placed in the student advising folders. Campus police reports, medical records, and statistical data compilations that contain no personally identifiable information for that student. There are two types of records as defined by FERPA: student directories and non-student directories. A student directory would include the name, address, phone number, and email of the students, possibly the date of attendance, degrees awarded if it's a college, enrollment status, and major field of study. Non-directory information cannot be released without prior written consent. Some examples of non-directory information could be the Social Security number, student identification numbers, race, ethnicity, gender, transcript, grade point average, date of birth, detailed registration information. What needs to be in prior written consent? You need to have the specific records that are to be disclosed. You need to state the purpose for the disclosure. Identify the party or class of parties to whom you can disclose the information. The date, signature of the student whose record is disclosed, the signature of the custodian of the record, and the parent if the student is not of age. When is prior written consent not required? It is not required if information is disclosed directly to the student, other institutions where there is a legitimate need to know, health and safety, also the subpoenas. What are the consequences for violating FERPA? The enforcement of this act has been assigned to the Family Policy Compliance Office within the Department of Education. Some of the consequences could be the withdrawal of federal funds. This has not happened, but it could happen. How do you file a complaint? There are two criteria. The complaint must be filed within 180 days of the infraction, and there must be sufficient evidence to prove that there was a violation. If those are met, then the compliance office will contact the superintendent or the director of the cooperative and notify him of the violation. It will allow the institution to voluntarily make the corrections and then offer some guidelines to better comply with FERPA in the future. How does FERPA affect me? Well, first of all, it's the law, so it must be followed. Second of all, you could be sued, and that would directly affect us. If a student has not restricted access to directory information, you could release the name, address, and telephone number as well as the email address of the student. If the student has blocked that directory information, you should not release any information about the student, and in fact, if asked, you should say, "I have no information about that individual." How does FERPA affect me? You cannot release any information that is personally identifiable to that student without prior written consent. Common violations of FERPA. Posting of grades outside your office, either by social security number, name, or a student identification number. You cannot do this. You can come up with a code word and list those grades by code word, but do not list them in alphabetical order. Notification of grades by email. There is no guarantee that the confidentiality of the internet, so you should not post the grades by email. Also, I have seen teachers post student grades on Facebook with their initials. That is strictly not allowed. Schools should use a third party to help host the grades of the student. Some examples would be Power School, Skyward, Class Builder is one that you can use through Ed Helper. Some more common violations of FERPA are faculty members not sharing their sole possession notes. If you share those notes, then they become student records. So you cannot, then they are under FERPA. Another violation is talking to a parent at a grocery store or ball game. You cannot do this. You should just ask the parent to schedule an appointment, or that you would be glad to call the parent at a later time. But you cannot discuss their student or any other student in a public place. Another violation is in the break room or the workroom and visiting about certain students. That, even if you don't use their names or use their initials, that is still a violation of FERPA. Teachers should not have the students grade each other papers, pass out papers, or call out grades in class. It means more work for the teacher, but it is the law. Do not post work samples of the students with their names on it. Now let's go through a quiz. True or false? Is it okay to post the students' grades by social security number? False. You need to use a student code word. True or false? It's okay to include the student's GPA when writing a recommendation letter. This too is false. You cannot disclose that personal identifiable information. True or false? Are examinations and research papers subject to FERPA? Again, false. It's student work and it cannot be released. Do the parents of students that are 18 years or older have the right to see their child's educational records only if they are paying for the post-secondary training? Again, this is false. The student must give you a prior written consent for their parents to see their grades. Is a written note by one person based on personal observation and not shared with anyone else subject to FERPA? This is considered a personal one-person note, and it is not subject to FERPA. True or false? Is it okay to hand back graded papers by laying them on a table for the students to pick up? False. This reveals too much about the student's grades. Does the faculty have the right to see the educational record of the student attending your school without giving a reason? Again, false. There must be an educational need to know. In brief, when in doubt, do not release any information. Thank you for listening to this presentation.